Today I have my dear friend, soul sister, everything, Kate Harlow. Welcome back to the Feminine Frequency Podcast.
Thank you for having me back. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be having a conversation with one of my favorite people on the planet.
Yeah, it feels really good. So I love co-creating and weaving with you. And I feel like we've talked about this before, how our soul mission, feel like we're cut from the same cloth. Like we're both here in such a similar mission, and obviously teaching and sharing from our own unique experiences and our own wisdom and guidance. But really at the core, both of us have very similar values and really are connected to a greater soul mission to empower women to live a life that is true to their soul, that is true to who they are, that really allows them to love more deeply and authentically.
Mm.
And so that is something that I so appreciate about you, the way that you teach and how you really are a stand for women.
Yeah, I love that too.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the expanded love method and really using these different archetypes and saboteur archetypes that you teach on to support women in being able to create healthy relationships. And before we get into that, I would love for you to share, how did you learn, or how did these saboteur archetypes, how did they come to you? Were there any personal experiences in your life that really led you to being a teacher of this work?
Yeah, that's a really big question because I've been on this path for 15 years and have been coaching for over 13 years and have studied so many different methodologies over the years that inspired the work that I created. But I would say the most significant pieces that inspired the expanded love method was when I studied something back in my coach's training, 15 years ago, which is crazy. I studied something called persona therapy. And at the time, I was about 5 years into oh, no, wait. That was the beginning of my personal development journey. It was probably less than 15 years ago because that's when I started school. And it was towards the end of my 2 year program that I took. So about 13 years ago. And I was so far into my personal development journey and I was so self-aware, but jealousy was the pattern and comparison was the pattern that was the strongest and most painful in my life. And at the time I had tried, I paid so many hypnotherapists and healers and coaches and therapists and workshops. And I just wanted to get rid of these parts of myself. I wanted to cut them off, or I just couldn't understand what was wrong with me. And I felt so, especially jealousy in relationship it's really unattractive and repulsive. I thankfully attracted men who stuck it out for the most part, but it created a lot of disconnection. Relationships where we were together for years but not having sex anymore because it that was the one of the biggest barriers, where it was like, you have to cut off all parts of yourself to be in relationship with me. I'll cut off all parts of myself too. It was just so funny because it's like, of course I went down that rabbit hole first before getting on this path. And so that's what persona therapy was, what helped shift that pattern for me the most. And what persona therapy was you name all the different aspects of yourself. So with persona therapy, I had my jealousy aspect and I had my people pleaser aspect, and I had you name the good, bad, and the ugly parts. So what I loved about it was building a relationship with that part of me as if it wasn't me, and starting to see her as a roommate, as a friend, as an ally, but not like that pattern, starting to externalize and not associate that with myself. And it was such a profound experience because it allowed me to see where the pattern came from, to have more compassion for myself, to have more understanding. And that it was so poignant on my journey, but what was overwhelming was naming all of the parts. So for myself on my own journey, I just gave saboteur is a term, apparently other people use it, but it came through me as I was deepening this within myself. And so I just named mine Regina from Mean Girls because she was that to me internally. And it helps so much with me now having choice. Okay, I can see Regina coming up and wanting to protect me right now and wanting to attack my partner or wanting to tell me that this other woman has something that I don't. And when I could see it as Regina and not me, it allowed me to really step into parts of myself and make new choices from a deeper part of myself. So in the expanded love method, we're working with the saboteur, which is of course your ego, your protective mechanisms, your survival mechanisms, and the heroine, which is your soul. And so in my work, the naming was so significant for me in that journey. And also I went on a name change journey myself, which I think I shared in our last interview. It's a long story, so I won't get into it. But I went on my own personal name change journey many, many years ago. And that was a huge part in me stepping into my heroine as well and becoming the heroine, really the heroine of my own story, becoming the writer of my story as opposed to operating and living from this story that someone else has written for us. You know, go to school, get a job, find a man, get married, get a house, have kids, da da da. Da. And so that's it, you know, many places led me to that place, but that's what helped me the most in my journey. And then when I started coaching as a business coach for many, many years, and I was teaching in the business space and I was working with women around self-worth in business. And everyone was like, you should be a love coach. You're like the love guru, love, 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 because that's just my nature. And so when I shifted into the love space, this method just came through me. In my very first pilot program, the saboteur and heroine work just came through me. And yeah, it's been really, really profound. So the saboteur archetypes, same thing came through me, but also came from 12 years of experience of coaching women from all over the world in many capacities, some in business, some in love, and seeing all the ways we sabotage ourselves and we take our power away and we give our power away rather than standing in our power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love naming it as persona work, and really taking a look at all these different parts of ourselves. And one of the things that I started recognizing through my meditation practice and through mindfulness, and if you look at any like Buddhist texts or Buddhist philosophy, it is really about becoming the observer of your thoughts.
Mhm.
And I know that before I had my awakening and before I really got into personal development work, there was no separation between this like bitchy inner critic part of myself and the truth of who I am, which is love and kindness and caring. And that voice just took up so much space in my
Mhm.
world and made me so unhappy and so judgmental and so disconnected, not only from other people, but from my own love, from my own
Yeah.
joy. And what you're sharing here is so powerful of learning how to first become aware that we have these different parts to ourselves. And just because our brain is telling us that like we don't look pretty or that other women are better than us or whatever the jealousy happens to be in relationships that came up for you, it doesn't mean that that's true, and that's only one part of you that believes that. So this and there, I think there's other psychologists who have used this is a really common, framework in psychology and therapy for self-discovery and for relating to yourself in these different parts of yourself in a different way. So I'd love for you to share what happens when we, shame these different parts of ourselves, or when we don't let them be seen, and when we like don't like certain parts of ourselves. So jealousy, it's like you were saying, oh, I wanted to cut that off. I want that to go away. I
Mhm.
didn't want that to be part of my life. How does that show up if you're trying to create a new relationship with that part of yourself? It feels kind of challenging because it's a feeling, it's a part of you that you don't want to be part
Yeah,
of you.
I mean, that's why the saboteur work is so powerful, is that it's about building a relationship with that part and getting to know that part, and also like having space for that part. And in my work, the saboteur is all of it. So there are the 5 saboteur archetypes, which we'll touch on. And yet, like, we all play different. Most women have different, like, have all of them playing out, or some have, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that are stronger. They're kind of like the love languages, but your patterns in relationships and dating, and they'll show up in all relationships. But the thing is, so what has made this work so helpful is having it be like it's just one aspect. Like all the parts are one other person. And the reason it's so profound, naming that part and getting to know the saboteur as your roommate, when you try and shame it or get rid of it or cut it off, it gets louder, like in the Disney movies, like Ursula, you mess with Ursula and she becomes this giant monster in The Little Mermaid. And so it's the same with the saboteur. If you try and cut the saboteur off, or you're mad at it, or try and push it away, it's going to get louder and try and protect you, because where these protective mechanisms come from is when we're little. And it actually used to keep you safe. That part of you used to be your protector. You had to learn in order to survive childhood, you had to learn how to contort yourself, how to show up in a certain way to fit into your family system, to fit into your school system, to fit into your friend groups, to make friends, to be approved of, loved, accepted, belonging, all of those things that we're naturally trying to create to create safety as a child. And so the saboteur protective mechanisms are essential when we're children. But when we become adults, it's called saboteur because it sabotages you from being who you are. This part sabotages you from having the life you want to live. It sabotages you from experiencing the level of love you want to experience, or sisterhood you want to experience, or having an epic, successful, powerful life. Most of the women I work with are so fucking powerful and they have these amazing lives. They're perfect on paper life. They've got it all. They've got their dream house, their dream job. They're, making amazing money, and they've got great friends, and they've got, healthy kids. And they wake up one day, kind of like Elizabeth Gilbert in the movie and book Eat, Pray, Love. They wake up one day and feel like, wow, I have everything I ever wanted, and I feel empty inside, or I feel miserable, or I hate my life, or I feel disconnected, or I just don't feel anything. And so that's what it's because the protective mechanisms were leading the way. And that script that someone else wrote for our life story and what it's supposed to be was leading the way. And the beauty of getting to know this part of you, but not letting it lead your life, is now you get to meet who you really are. And for example, jealousy, the pattern of jealousy, the only reason I was jealous of other women is because my saboteur was pointing towards something that my soul was also longing to experience within myself. It was just a repressed aspect of ourselves. So our saboteur, the different archetypes and the different aspects of the saboteur are simply revealing. There's so much, and I talk about this in my masterclass coming up, which I'll share in a little bit. But the saboteur archetypes that are playing out for you are revealing a repressed aspect of your soul, of who you really are, of your heroine. So for me, I was tremendously jealous of women who were sensual and sexy and like in their bodies. And that's because I was none of that. And I had a belief at the time, oh, I'm just not sexy. I'm not very sexual. I'm not sensual.
Mm.
And once I started to get to know my saboteur and see that this was protection, and I could see where it came from, well, then it allowed me to actually start to cultivate those parts of me. And now I don't feel that. And it's so cool because here I am, however many years later from shifting that pattern within myself. I, knock on wood, but I never feel jealous of other women. I feel inspired. And I had to teach myself how to do that. But it used to be a practice of, okay, Regina's making up a story that this person's amazing. So it must mean that I suck and I could never be like them and I could never have that or whatever. And it took radical responsibility of me, like, okay, what am I desiring? What is that woman amplifying? What is she illuminating that I'm shut down from? What is she amplifying that I'm disconnected from. And then I started to nourish and feed those parts of myself. And that brought it into balance. Because the truth is, with your saboteur and those thoughts and stories in our minds, they're not even our own. Like, that's why giving her a name and getting to know her like she's your roommate that will be there with you for life, but like not letting her lead your life is so essential, because that's the voice of our conditioning. It's
Mhm.
the voice of our family system. It's the voice of our teachers. It's the voice of bullies. It's the voice of every man who ever hurt us. It's the voice of friends who hurt us. It's the voice of our friends who told us what to do. It's the voice of the media, social media, our social
Mhm.
circles. Like, it's not our own voice. The judgment, the fear, the limitation, the doubt, the controlling, the fantasy, all of those things, like, that was all learned. When you were a child, you were wildly expressed. You gave no fucks what anyone thought. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? I haven't even checked in. Yeah, okay, I thought so. You don't care what other people think. You're fully in your body, you're in your heart. You walk through the world like not afraid to feel your feelings no matter where you are, not afraid to walk around naked. Not afraid to say no, right? Our boundaries were strong. We were wildly expressed. And then over and over and over again, we got shut down, told who to be, what to think, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And that's still happening. I mean, look at the world right now. It's all about like, you're doing it wrong. Everyone's pointing the finger at everyone else
Mhm.
instead of looking in the mirror and just taking radical responsibility for how we feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I've seen for you, and I think this is similar to my own journey, like the relationships that you are able to have with women now because you've overcome this pattern,
Yes.
and not just with women but with everyone, with other people in your life, is dramatically different. Like, I remember when I was in high school and even in college, I had all of these insecurities and constantly compared myself to other people. And even though I wouldn't speak that out loud, people could feel it.
Mhm.
And it created this barrier and this wall of intimacy where I so deeply wanted to have girlfriends. I so deeply wanted to be around other people, but I was so judgmental. And the judgment wasn't necessarily about anyone else. It was about myself. It was about my own insecurities. And it really created this block of being able to connect in the ways that I wanted to. And so I love this journey that you've been on, and even just naming it as jealousy, and then recognizing that because you've shifted this pattern and used, this method to create a new relationship with jealousy, and really allowing it to be an opportunity to bring that aspect out of yourself is really cool. That's what I love about personal development. We can alchemize and transmute and
Mm.
transform these things that like weigh us down and that art can be really heavy for us, and we can turn them into something really beautiful with the right tools. So I
Yes.
love that that's been your journey, and I just so see that within you. Like, I never feel that ever, not even like a tiny speck of energy in our friendship and in the way that I see you loving your other friends. Like, it doesn't exist. It's not like you're just trying to suppress it or hide it. Like, it's
Mhm.
not there. And that's really
Yeah.
beautiful. It
Yeah, and even with strangers, it's like even with women I see on social media who are leading or doing something that maybe I desire to do. It's a daily practice, if this is something that like we all have differentiating patterns, but I think comparison is something that most women experience, whether they share it out loud or not. Most of us are comparing ourselves, especially with social media. It's now become an even more toxic pattern that takes over so many of us. And even the story most women have, like, oh, that woman has it all together. And I always say to my clients when they share that, like, I'm a mess, but like that woman has it all together. It's like, no, I've worked with that woman. Literally, I've worked with every woman who looks on paper, on the surface, like she has it all together. That's who I work with. And when you get inside, she's completely disconnected from all of it. She doesn't get to even feel joy or pleasure or the
Mhm.
the beauty of who she is. And so it's it's like one of my favorite mantras is like when I see someone else succeeding or someone else doing something that I'm desiring to experience, it's like, thank you for showing me what is possible,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's what we do for each other. And I had I was chatting with my dear friend the other day, who, Kelsey, and I was sharing some celebrations, some successes, and she was like, "Thank you for." We say that to each other, like, "Thank you for showing me what's possible. Thank you for reminding me how much is available." Because we all get, into our places of limitation. That's your saboteur. Places of, "Oh, I could never do that." I think my biggest because the thing is, your saboteur is pointing towards something, saying, "Oh, that woman's got something special, you could never be that way, or you suck," or whatever the storyline is. It's also your soul pointing towards the same thing, saying, "Oh, that's me." Like, there's I'm meant to be go in that direction too, or there's something she's embodying that I'm meant to experience, and or that's inside of me. And all these qualities, they're inside. We don't have to go finding them. Just have to peel back all the layers that are blocking us from experiencing them. And I think, like, my greatest mentor in my life, who I worked with for 8 or 9 years in her company when I was in the business realm, and I ended up taking over and teaching all her programs when she had a baby for her clients. She mentored me for many, many years. And when I first started with the company, I was a coach, a support coach at her events and client care. And I would sit at the back of the room and I would watch her on stage, and she was unbelievably mesmerizing. Her teaching abilities, like, she was the best in the industry at the time, like, just absolutely so good at teaching, so embodied, so mesmerizing, so powerful. The whole audience would always be in the palm of her hand. She was funny, she was emotional, she was just this, like, magical human on stage teaching these workshops. And they were mostly like marketing and stage presence and selling, and I would just be at the back of the room while she's teaching about marketing, totally mesmerized by her. And of course, because, like, someone who wasn't meant to speak on stages would just be like, "Oh yeah, she's good," but they wouldn't be like so taken away. And then my saboteur would be in my ear telling me, "You could never have that. You could never be that. You suck. You have a fear of public speaking. You're meant to be at the back of the room." So then when she wanted to start mentoring me to speak, I would freak out and be like, "No, I'm meant to be at the back of the room. I'm not meant to be on stage. It's a no for me." Like, she would put me on stage to do her intros, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, I'd get sick before and after." And it was like torture. And that all was happening because it was pointing me in the direction I was meant to go. And I'm so grateful that I knew that, and I learned that, and I was willing to do the deeper healing to allow and change that relationship within, to not let my saboteur and those fear-based protective mechanisms actually make my choices. So I did some deeper healing, and she started mentoring me, and I became the head facilitator, traveling the world teaching her programs, and which led me, 6 years ago, into starting my own business and doing my own work in the world. And I'm so forever grateful for that experience, because I wouldn't be living my purpose had that experience not happened. But everything we look at and see in another woman is a reflection of ourselves. But when the saboteur is in charge, your saboteur is going to find every way to convince you and tell you that that is not a safe direction to go in, and that you'll never make it, and that you're not worthy, and you're not good enough, and you're not lovable, and you're not. And it's not true. None of that is true.
Hmm.
Right? Your saboteur thinks you're still that little kid, and that little girl, of course, is still inside you. And your saboteur is working on overtime trying to protect her, was actually hurting her, right? Reinforcing her belief that she's not good enough. And so that's why it's so important to get to know your saboteur first intimately, and then to start to unlock all of those repressed aspects of what I call your heroine, or your soul self, so that your heroine can protect that little girl inside by actually setting boundaries, by doing things that are uncomfortable and growing and evolving, by following your heart, learning how to make decisions from your heart rather than from the fantasy stories in your mind. Like, it's
Hmm.
absolutely the most life-changing practice.
Yeah, whenever I have shared that in any of my workshops or with any of my clients, that what you see in another woman is actually something that is a mirror for something that already exists within you. It's like this moment where it takes their breath away, or their heart opens a little bit more, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, there's this like soul recognition of truth." Um And if their saboteur has been running the show up until then, there's just been this constant voice that's saying, no, that's not you. You can't have that. You're never going to be like that. And so it is this like breath of fresh air where it's like, oh, yeah, that is me. And there's just a part of me that wants to be more fully expressed. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation, and it does come up often on the podcast. And it's probably because, comparison is something that everyone deals with, like we said, because of social media, because of the industry, whatever it is, but like it is something that we deal with. And so I'm really glad that we got another perspective on this
Mm.
topic. Yeah. So let's dive in and talk about the 5 different saboteur archetypes. If we can just do like a little sneak peek, because I know you are going to be teaching about this in your upcoming masterclass series. So
Yes.
let's go through the 5 of them.
Perfect. Yes. So I'll give a little glimpse and I'll just preface it by saying so I'm doing this 5-day masterclass, and every day I'm going live for an hour to 75 minutes on each archetype. So there's a lot to them. I'm going to give the tip of the iceberg of each one, and there's a lot of beliefs that come with them, and there's a root to each one of them, a driving belief that's creating that protective mechanism, and there's an antidote to each one of them. And so I'll be going deep into that on the masterclass, and you're all welcome. It's totally free. It's 5 days. But the very first one is the fantasy addict. And the fantasy addict is, I mean, I have a podcast that's called the New Truth Podcast. We just had Amy on, actually, and it's amazing for women around dating and love. And the New Truth podcast is all about busting what we call the old paradigm of love, which is rooted in fairy tale and fantasy. And oh, once I meet the one, then I'll feel better. I just need to get married. I just need a husband. I just need a relationship. And I mean, there's so much to it, but this storyline that women are not enough on our own, and that we only have value for a relationship, and that we'll feel better once we have relationship, which you and I both know is very not true. Like, relationships take a lot of work, and relationships, especially if you don't have self-awareness, most people don't have deeply intimate growth-based relationships because of the old paradigm. And so the fantasy addict aspect of the saboteur is really because of the old paradigm. So we all have it to a degree. Some women are more extreme than others in this one, but the fantasy addict is basically addicted to the idea of love, or the idea. I mean, even taking relationships out of it. Fantasy addict is always it's the part of your saboteur that's always telling a story. And like, your friend doesn't text you back, and then their story is that she's mad at you. That's the fantasy addict. The fantasy addict goes on a date and is like either assessing this guy up and saying like, okay, I think this could be it. He could be the one. I want the next date. Like that, and thinks they know the person just from all the things he's telling her, or from what she's seeing. Okay, he's 6 foot tall, and he's gorgeous, and he's successful, and he's charming, and he paid the bill. This is perfect. He is my dream guy. He's funny, made me laugh. Okay, great. Right. And the fantasy addict is always focused on the other person, and always focused on the next thing. Okay, now I'm home after the date, and the date went well. So I'm wanting I need the text. And then I need the second date, and then I need the commitment, and then I need the I love you, and I need to move in together, and I need a ring, and I need to get married, and I need the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And it's kind of funny because there's a collective fantasy addict. Like, how many single women have ever heard the statement, "Oh, how are you single? You're such a catch. Can I set you up with someone? Are you dating? Have you met anyone?" And that's the collective fantasy addict. And like, then you get into a relationship, and your friends are like, is he the one? Are you gonna marry? Do you think you're gonna get married? And then as soon as you get married, everyone's like, oh, do you think you're gonna have kids soon? Are you gonna have kids? And then as soon as you have a baby, they're like, are you gonna have more than one baby? Like, the collective fantasy addict that's constantly keeping us from deepening into the experience and pushing us into the future.
I have a really funny experience with this one, where before I got married, back when I did get married, our families both like ran in the same social circle. And so we would go to like dinners or events, and we had probably been dating for like a year, maybe a year and a half. And not only would I get this, but my mom and his mom would both get this. People would come
Yes.
up and say, you're next. And they would just
Yes.
nudge me with their shoulder and with
Yeah.
their elbow. And I'm like, what is the deal? Why is everyone having this obsession over like what's supposed to happen next in my relationship? And like it
Mhm.
was like this whole like societal conspiracy theory, which was fine. It's not, doesn't come from a bad place, but it's like just this norm of like, oh, you're getting married next, or what's your next step? And
Yeah.
there is so much freaking pressure. So it,
Yes.
my
And
mom would be like, we would like count how many times would people would say it. Like that's how bad it was.
it's crazy. So it's not just you in the fantasy, it's everyone in the fantasy.
Mhm.
And that fantasy is, I'll just speak to quickly like why fantasy is so dangerous. Like this is how women end up in incredibly toxic relationships because they're so blinded by the idea of something and by the way someone looks or the way they seem on paper, or the way they check all the boxes. If you have a checklist, you are a fantasy addict, you know, and the unfortunate thing is most dating teachers out there are teaching fantasy, right? They're teaching like get the checklist, make sure you like do XYZ to get the guy. That's the shapeshifter. We'll talk about that. But like most dating teachings out there are based on fantasy. Like even there's this one dating coach I follow who I love and adore, but he's always posting, my client got engaged, celebrating my client got engaged. Yes, success. Who's the next woman to sign up for my program so you can get engaged too? And like there's such a flaw in the being so attached to the result is what blinds us from actually being in the experience. So we're either missing a beautiful experience of like the relationship right now in this moment, or we're missing all the red flags. You know, I have
Mm.
almost all of my clients have been divorced, and almost all of those divorced women have like knew on their wedding day it wasn't aligned, but they fantasy blinded themselves over it and they just kept pretending. And so there's just so much of the fantasy addict. It's incessant in our culture. Every song, every love song is fantasy based. I'm going to make some really funny reels soon that are about the saboteur archetypes. I'm excited because there's a million fantasy songs.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the first one. So much more to it. Join me in the masterclass. Second one is the self-sacrificer. And this is also very common in women because we have been taught for centuries to sacrifice ourselves. Women are glorified for being selfless. Oh, my grandmother was the most amazing woman. She was so selfless. She had less of a self, right? To put everybody else first is glorified for women. And yet we're all hanging by a thread, deeply resentful, so bitter, so pissed off that nobody's supporting us. Like when the self-sacrificer is in charge, it's like that's a woman gets into a relationship and she'll bend over backwards, like do everything for the guy. And then one day wakes up one day and like she's basically has a teenage son, husband or boyfriend because she's sacrificed herself and done everything for him. That's actually a combination of another one as well. But the self-sacrificer is, it's okay. I'll like whatever you need. I'll bend over backwards. You want me to be this. You want me like always puts everyone else first and at the expense of herself.
I have like 3 clients that I'm working with right now who can 100% relate to this pattern. So I think
Yes.
we all can in some way, and
Yes.
so relevant. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. The next
Yeah.
one's the isolator, and the isolator is just like, "Ugh, don't even want a relationship." And if they're in relationship, isolators typically feel alone wherever they go. And isolators, sometimes they feel their feelings, but nobody knows they have feelings. They don't share them with anyone, or they don't even feel their feelings. They're just so numb from their feelings. And isolators have this belief that they're a burden, even though they're always, I have clients and friends who are isolators, and they're always the people who are like the farthest thing from a burden. They're like so sweet. Everybody just wants to give to them and help them, but they're just like, nope, isolate. And when they date, it's like a wall goes up. Like they're just so terrified to be vulnerable, to be seen, to be supported. So yeah, there's so much to it, but that's the isolator. The next one is the controller, which is most women I work with, and most women I work with are controller hybrid with a self-sacrificer. So that's the one,
Mhm.
those are the ones that actually are divorced and their ex-husband is a child, and they're so annoyed because they have to do everything and their ex-husband doesn't even know how to do anything. He can't like call the school to tell them their child is sick, or like he can't book a dentist appointment, but it's not his fault. It's a dynamic because the controller is like, I'm going to do everything because nobody else can do it as good as me. And right underneath that is anxiety and like not feeling safe. So trying to control everything outside of me and make everything perfect so I feel better internally, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You actually keep feeling worse and worse and worse and more
Mhm.
anxious and more unstable. And so that's the controller, and that's who they end up in relationship with because they overfunction so much and they're, perfectionists and expectations and whatever, that they attract partners who just don't show up.
Mhm.
As really common with
So
women who
common.
are powerful and successful and ambitious. And, they show up in the beginning of a relationship and they're just like leading and planning the dates and like,
Being in the masculine,
driving the
being in
ship.
the it's not necessarily the masculine there, it's an unhealthy, it's the, and I wouldn't call it toxic, but it is the unhealthy masculine
Yes.
drive where it comes from a desire to control or to feel
Yes.
safe, comes from a
Yes.
fear-based place. And if you have a woman in her masculine most of the time in the relationship, then the polarity sucks, and
Mhm.
like the sex sucks, or there is no sex, or
Yeah.
the chemistry really is affected. It's kind of like
Mm.
emasculate, especially when it's too controlling. It emasculates the men.
For
It stops
sure.
them from being able to show up. It doesn't give space for them to be able to be the
Yes.
leader or be a leader and contribute to the relationship.
Exactly. And the controller just doesn't trust other people or
Mhm.
life. The controller feels like I'm on my own. Doesn't like you typically my clients that I work with, there's no spiritual connection because they think they have to do everything. So there's no trust of
Mhm.
life, no trust of the universe, no trust of other people, and I can only trust myself. And then they end up taking on everything and again feeling resentful. And controllers often also have a lot of perfectionism. It's a lot of like making my life look perfect from the outside, not wanting to let anyone else down. So that's where it's a little bit of a blend with the self sacrificer. So that
Mhm.
one's really common. And then the last one is the shapeshifter. And I actually just recorded a reel for the shapeshifter. The reel I did was I'm a Barbie girl. And it's like, make me walk, make me talk, do whatever I please. I can act like a
Mm.
star. I can beg on my knees. Like that's the shapeshifter. Like I will do whatever you need me to do. I will be who you need me to be or who I think you need me to be. Right. I'm going to show up on this date and I'm like, who do I need to be? And some women hear this one and they're like, oh, that's definitely not me. But then they realize when they get into like if you get into relationship and all of a sudden you don't hang out with your friends consistently anymore, or you don't go to dance class consistently anymore, or I mean, that's a combination of fantasy and shapeshifter. It's just like the only thing that exists is my relationship, which is the fastest way to kill polarity and to kill a relationship is putting like it seems so exciting in the beginning. We want to spend all our time there, but that actually depletes the energy and depletes the beauty. Like what makes the reason you feel that way in the first place is because you're two sovereign beings who are filled up within yourselves, who are living your great lives. And then you come together and then you're like, oh my God, this is the thing. Rah. But if you give up everything else, you're a shapeshifter. If you let
Mhm.
go of things that matter to you, you're a shapeshifter. Or the shapeshifter is also like being in toxic relationships and, like just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, or just changing who you are in relationship or even when you're dating.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for outlining those. I know there's so much there, and one of the things that is crazy, like these patterns, I'm sure everyone who's listening, there's at least one where they're like, yep, that's me. And the purpose of this framework is to provide not another way to shame yourself or make yourself wrong or judge yourself, but it
Mm.
really is to bring these to awareness so that you can notice the patterns. And then, we obviously in one podcast episode can't get into how do you shift these patterns. And I know that's what you're going to be teaching more about in the masterclass series, but it's like, these patterns run really deep, and like you said earlier, they come from childhood, they come from societal norms. And I think hearing these and being able to start to bring awareness to when are they showing up and knowing how to shift them is really powerful if you let it be. So if you're listening, you're like, oh shit, I'm all of those, or oh shit, like a lot of those sound like me. Yeah, this is how we're actually trained and raised as women as young girls, and they're deep, deep programs. So I love this work that you're doing, Kate. And I know because I've met some of your clients and I know how profound the work is for them. And I'm just really excited that we got to give a sneak peek of the archetypes today, and also that you're going to be going deeper. So for women who want to join you for the expanded love journey, is that what it's called?
Masterclass.
Masterclass. Okay, cool.
Mm.
Well, it is a journey because you're doing 5 days, which is
Yes, it's a
amazing and
5-day
super
series. Yeah,
generous.
masterclass series, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So excited to share that information. We will include the link in the show notes. And is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today? Is there anywhere else that they can connect with you?
Yeah, well, definitely join me in the masterclass, because what I love about this work so much is it brings lightness to the dark. There's a lot of different ways to get to the same place. And I was told by someone a long time ago that my greatest gift is like to be the light in the dark, which is funny because my
Mm,
heroine name is Ayla, Ayla, which came to me in a meditation, and that means moonlight.
mm,
And that to me is the beauty of this work. Even just witnessing, I had a group coaching call last night, and witnessing my clients, the liberation and freedom that comes from them, seeing them like, oh, there's Dolores, hey Dolo, and like how they can catch each other's saboteurs, and how freeing it is to know it's not you. Like, it's the most liberating thing in the world. And, in order to have the life we desire and have the love we desire and to feel the way we want to feel, we have to be willing to know ourselves. And
mhm,
so this is such a simple, concrete, beautiful, light way, playful way to know yourself deeply. And once you know these patterns and you know your saboteur intimately, now you can make significant changes and choices to empower yourself to create a new experience. So I would love to have you in the masterclass. It's totally free, 5 full days. It's going to be so amazing. And my Instagram handle is Kate Harlow XO. So you can check me out on Instagram. And yeah, I've got other offerings and stuff in
and the New
there. But
Truth podcast.
oh, yeah, the New Truth podcast. You want to head over there for sure. I'm a fan of my own
Yeah.
podcast. It's so good.
Yeah, her podcast is amazing. I think now I've been on there twice. So
Yeah.
yay. Yeah. Well, just want to really reflect one more time, Kate, just your knowledge and expertise and the depth of wisdom that you have in this realm of empowering women with their mindset, with their thoughts, with their ways of being is phenomenal. You're such a beautiful teacher of this work. And I really feel so grateful to be walking on this path and guiding women back home to themselves. And, I shared this with you in a voice note yesterday or maybe the day before. I don't know. We talked every day this week, I think, but like just what an honor it is to be in relationship with you, and how loving and supportive in the way that you show up as a friend and as a teacher is just such a gift. So thank you so much. Thanks for being on here and sharing your wisdom with my community. And we'll share all of the info so they can find you and continue to learn with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love you so much. I'm
I
so
love you
grateful.
too. Thanks so much.
Bye.